Okay, but someone's not looking at me.
Oh, they don't like to.
Oh, on purpose?
Yeah, on purpose.
Oh, well that's allowed. Okay.
Yeah, that's alright.
No, that's all right, that's all right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so my name's Harry, I'm done.
Okay.
You're free. So my name's Harry Roseman, and for those, I'm an artist. I'm a sculptor, I draw, and I've done collages, and I make films. And someone called me an archivist recently, and I kind of like that, so I'm taking that as well. And what I did now, it's not what I'm going to talk about, but I have lots of photo projects, and this I did a video, and this was for my groups project, which is photographs or videos of any group of people I find myself in. And then I have a visitors project, which is everyone who comes to where we live, since it's been going on since 1971, and self-portraits, which has been going on bumpily since maybe 1958 or something. I wasn't cognizant of what I was doing, but nonetheless. Okay, so what I've decided to do is, sometimes I really like to give a talk, if I can give a talk at an angle about my work that I've never done before. So what I decided to do is organize my images within the idea of relief space. So I've gone back to this one, which is 68, 69, and through sculpture, collage, a little bit drawing, but not too much, and film, I've put together this group of works where I deal with relief space. Everyone knows what relief space is, right? Yes? Okay, good. So if you want to think of coins, so coins are very low relief, and then there's high reliefs, maybe the pediments of the Parthenon, the Elgin marbles. That's pretty high relief, and that can be high enough sometimes where some of the objects even leave the attachment of the background. Reliefs are usually one point of view, and they can be very shallow like a coin or deep like the Elgin marbles, and then there's undercut reliefs, which would be like Egyptian reliefs, like on walls in temples, because in that case, it was pretty inventive. You have this concrete wall, or whatever it was made out of, and if you want to make relief space, the only way to do it is to cut in and then form the relief shapes. And if you want to go back to prehistoric times, sometimes cave paintings, the shaman, the artist, whatever you want to call them, would find a raised part of the rock and then make that into like a bison or something. And those are really reliefs as well. And so my interest in relief goes way back to right when I got out of school. And for those of you who were here earlier, this is the same image of Catherine's first painting. We were living in Massachusetts. I was making this insane sculpture of Catherine's parents' house, which I was working on for a year, and it was just going on forever. And I'm pretty sure Catherine said, why don't you just do something else or look at something? And so I parked myself not far from where Catherine had done this painting, and I did the sculpture. And at that point, I hadn't quite thought through that I was making a sculpture from one point of view. Once I started, it became very evident. So even though this is a freestanding work, it is relief space because the objects are compressed prospectively as I saw them when I was sculpting. Okay, so now we'll move along. So you see that's Jersey City. So I started to get very excited about this idea of what I would call almost three-dimensional reliefs. So one point of view, figuring out the perspective as I saw it, but letting it be freestanding. And then you can see from the view on the right, the lower one, that the top one is what I saw, and the one on the right is how I solved the space between the forms that I saw at a certain resolution. So in order to make that space from the one on the top left, I had to leave space between the objects or the buildings, and so then I would fill in the spaces in a way that I thought sculpturally made sense, and also didn't interfere with what it would look like if you were actually looking at the thing. And one thing about these reliefs, and you'll see a number of them, and some of them get much more complicated, is it allows the viewer to move out of time and space. So the relief, the sculpture, stays in one time zone in relationship to where the sculptor and the viewer are when you're looking at it. And when you move out and around, the sculpture is stuck in time in that other place, and you get to sort of move into some fourth dimension and go to the side, even though the world has stayed frontal. I think that may be understandable. Heavy finger, let's see. Okay, so I started doing a lot of these reliefs, and some of them would be still lives. This is 19, and they're somewhat in chronological order, but not always. And are people going to the film tomorrow?
Yeah.
That's good.
You can
No,
say
that's
it.
very good.
You can stay in there.
Okay, I don't want to repeat what I'm saying too much, but my interest in relief started when I was quite young and spent a lot of time at the Personal Museum and hours and hours in the Egyptian collection. And it was the Egyptian reliefs, both the ones that lied on the surface and the ones that were undercut, that thrilled me and excited me. And I think often of relief as being a very magical state. You have something that you could draw flat, but it has a certain amount of dimension. And the dimension can be decided upon, or it can be totally perceptual. And most of them, it's all perceptual, but some of them you'll see were some combination of decision and perception. But I'm going to show you a few where I decided to absolutely try to come to terms with how I saw what I was seeing. To be very analytical and say, this is how this looks next to that. So, this is 2/3 life size. So it was my wall in my studio, and the postcards are like little, but and it's very subtle. And then I decided to do a painted version. And this is a plaster cast of the other one that I painted from life. And when people see it, they somehow assume it's life size until you really think about it a little bit. But it's really about 2/3 life size. And then certainly the postcards and stuff are like little separate paintings. Okay, and this is another view of, this is in Lexington, Massachusetts, and it's Mrs. Damry's house. And I was really experimenting with closeness and distance and how to talk about both, in this case, organic, but often geometry. How to make geometry compressed. Have any of you seen The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari? I recommend it to everyone. It's a 1930s, I'm guessing, German silent film. And the settings are very much compressed. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful film. Very much like German expressionist painting. And also relief certainly has an interesting relationship to both sculpture and to painting because of its singular viewpoint. Okay, so this is a more complicated one. This is Hoboken and Manhattan, and I put the top view down so you could see again how things spread out and splay, and then the top left one is fairly much the right view, as is the bottom close-up, and that's the World Trade Center. And they're originally all made of clay. The one on the right is a picture of a clay, when it was still in clay before it was cast into aluminum. And you know, I used very precise little dental tools and stuff to make all those edges. And so I would have to solve in certain ways what I was looking at. So in the window is a stained glass window. The tiles are the tiles in the bathroom, and they have very slight raised and like not lining up exactly. And then that was a bathroom. And this is an early depiction of what you will see a lot of my extreme interest in fabric and folding. And this is called Room in the View for Hoboken. And this is a cast aluminum version of it, but the original was wood and plastiline, and this is a view outside our apartment in Jersey City. And you can see from the next picture, the landscape goes all the way back behind the wall, so that if you peek your head in close, it doesn't just stop. It gets more and more compressed and perspectival. And then the back of the sculpture, the sides, oh good, I can use my laser pointer. Yay. Oh, then this is the side of it, and it's closed in on the back and the top, and then I have a light inside and a dimmer, so I can control what time of day it is outside. And one thing that happened, which I think was because of the heat inside made by the light, at certain times it sort of shimmers, like there's kind of an atmosphere or a fog outside, which was a total wonderful present. And I might have said all the furniture and stuff was constructed out of wood, and that is still compressed slightly, you know. So I think of it as a kind of relief space. And one thing about, and this actually I started in Lexington, Massachusetts, and finished when we moved to the Hudson Valley. But, you know, it's a still life. But this is actually the view out the window. So how I decided to handle that was almost very slightly in that incised Egyptian way. And the name, I don't know if I said that, the name for those undercut is intaglio. And for deep reliefs, it's alto relievo, and the regular reliefs are relievo. At least that's in Italian anyway. And there's another drape, and there's these pots. And then this, for instance, is about, it's very shallow, but inside it goes down at an angle so you can't see it from the front so easily. Okay. This is called Three Doors, and the sizes are all there, so you could get a sense how shallow or not shallow some of them are. And for a while I was making these cast edition sculptures. This is cast into bronze, and I would paint them. And finally, you know, someone was asking me, Daniel, when I left behind a body of work to go to another body of work, was it because I turned on it? But it's usually because I have too many ideas and I can't stop myself from moving ahead. But where I started to get itchy was when I would make an edition like this of 5 or 6, I would get so sick of painting it. So someone had bought one from seeing the one that my dealer owned, and I just couldn't bring myself to paint it like the one they saw. And then so I did this, and they were horrified. But luckily, my dealer said they could have theirs and kept this. So that's one reason I stopped doing cast bronze edition of polychrome sculptures. I just got tired of doing them, painting them over and over again. And I got very bad about getting to actually do it. And a sculpture like this, which is a wall, a floor, and a ceiling, bespeaks or implies a whole bunch of distance behind because they're doors and they must open to something. So you have the shallowness and then the implication of the space. So clearly space, viewpoint, perception, and thus time are a big bunch of my issues that I deal with. And that's another still life, and it's called View from the World Trade Center, which is kind of a funny metaphor because clearly there are boxes and a cup of coffee and rocks and concrete block or brick. But the viewpoint made me think of being very up high. And then the painting is fairly fanciful. What I did, this one's painted bronze, but I started sometimes to work with, and I did it a few times, with plastiline. People know what plastiline is? Oil-based clay, but you could mix it with oil paint. And so it would be like having three-dimensional paint. So I would build the sculpture out of blobs of color that were actually clay. And so when this got cast, then I painted it just like what I had done with the relief.
Harry, was that on the floor?
No, on the wall.
Oh, we're looking.
Yeah, we're looking at it. It feels like you're looking down on it
Right.
because that's how I did it.
Right.
But no, it's on the wall.
It hung like a painting. Huh?
Yeah, just like a painting. Okay, so these are sculpture reliefs, and I did a whole bunch of collages for a long time, and sometimes I'd make them three-dimensional by cutting and shaping the things I was cutting out. So this is one of them. And you can see where it's three-dimensional, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
It's not hard to see. But strangely enough, or I don't know if it's strangely, I played, like this one is totally flat, whereas these are built up. These are built up, and these are flat. So I toyed with the idea of illusionism and actual space. And so I did a few of these. There's another one. And for a while, I did a number of collages for quite a while. And at one point, I didn't do anything but cut stuff out for 6 months, a year, I forget how long it was. And Catherine kept saying, I think he's going crazy. He just sits and cut things out. And then I started, I say this in the film too. I said, I don't see why anyone should ever be bored because you could just cut things out. I was totally entertained by cutting stuff out. And so I made a lot of collages, but now I have envelopes full of little cut out stuff. And that's much bigger, you can see from the dimensions. And those are Xerox made different sizes of logs that I then made into a three-dimensional construction. And that's another one, sometimes my collages would just be things, and I would, call it inventory. But you might be able to see, you can see where, that's three-dimensional. That's the shadows. So all these have depth to them. And it's, again, just like I think of relief as being almost a kind of sleight of hand magic, there's so much pleasure I took in taking an illusionistic flat thing and just morphing it into substance. I don't know why, I can't explain why I loved that transformation so much, except it gives me a little chill. And I did also, around this time for numbers of years, which I'm still doing, not the same. I did these weave and mark drawings, and this is one I put this in because it's a relief, because I folded the paper, did my drawing, unfolded the paper, and left the folds have a profile. And that's why it's in a box. And this is very, even though it's a relief, it's very much actuality. I mean, it's a broken plate. They're not really compressed, but they're piled on a surface. So it is a relief, even though it's not exactly relief space, except for the designs on the plates, which I carved in, would be like intaglio. And for anyone who's done printmaking, you know the term from that. Okay, then in 1985, I'm so glad I put this up. I would never know when I did anything. I did a collaboration with the two people who made the film you're going to see tomorrow, with Marta Renzi and Daniel Wolf. And we did a collaboration that was a dance, performance,
Poetry, spoken word.
event. And so I made what were the sets, and Marta, who's right here, did the choreography, and Daniel Wolf, who's over there, did the poetry. And then we worked together and figured out what we wanted it to be about, and how it was going to unfold. And then we commissioned someone else to do the music. And so these are the other sets. And now I have a little clip, very fast, little bump, bump, bump of what this thing actually looked like. Oh, do we have sound?
It's all right.
There's no sound.
There's a waitress there, selling yellow fries on white chipped plates, making sure that the bottle of ketchup was filled. I'd be there still.
An audience keeps so quiet, trying to stay as still as they can, as if...
If you go on YouTube and look me up, you'll see many films, and there's a version of Soft Cell, a whole 15-minute version. And that performance took place at La Mama, which is an alternative off-Broadway space in New York City.
But because we were talking, could you see what the
What?
idea was? That you'd get,
I could go back.
the image goes farther and farther back.
So this is the bedroom, like you're really there looking down on it. That was the name of it. This is the same set with some people, so you see how it worked a little bit. Hard choreographing, hard dancing. And this is the same room, but you see it from the front. So you're moving slightly back. And this is, you're moving back further, and the house has a front. There should be one more little clip.
Yep.
I don't know, let's see, maybe it'll stay. And the whole stage is raked.
Oh, wait, this is not the right, because so the next step there
And this
is
is the
that
last
little
one,
house.
where that's the same house way back. And then, so you get a sense. And then it's about both, it's about a lot of things, but one thing it was about exhibiting yourself and watching. So almost voyeurism and exhibitionism in a kind of subdued way.
Was it made as a live performance?
This was a live performance. And the film was, you know, we had somebody film it,
Which ought to be done again someday.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, it was very exciting, I think. I unfortunately didn't keep the set because I didn't have room for it. At one point I kept one chair, I don't have any idea where it is. Anyway, yes, we should
We should do it again.
get other people to build
Part
the
of
set
it-
for us.
Part of it is about the objectification of women's bodies.
Yes.
So if Harry made a set where it kept pulling away, the women's bodies stayed the same size, right? But the set got smaller and smaller and different, and that helped the whole discussion of how people look at women.
And the poems are so terrific,
Oh, yeah.
so wonderful. Okay, so now we're back to sculpture relief space. You know, I say plastoline and oil paint. I'm pretty sure that's what this is a picture of, even though there's a cast bronze version that looks identical to this. And this was also made with bits of clay with color. And the reason it says 1980 to 87 is because I had to go to New York City to my brother's apartment to work from his window. So I couldn't work on it every day. So it took forever. And that's the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building back there. Okay. And then I did these series of very shallow milk carton reliefs. And they're just numbered, relief number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 15, 16. And they play very much with this idea of this surface and moving into this surface and coming slightly above the surface. So the surface is like the given or the world, and then the kind of slippage is to move in and out from that place. And I did a lot of these with very slight variations. And mostly boxes and milk cartons are on a board. And this is a picture in clay. And then they were cast. This one's cast already. I think it's probably, I don't know, aluminum or bronze with a patina on it. And then this is one where I wanted to see what the rocks felt like, so it's called A Part of the Ground is Pulled Away. And for a while when I was sculpting rocks and really looking hard and trying to figure out what they look like, I had this strange, unreasonable fear that if I did this long enough, I could solve the essence of enlightenment, which I didn't like that idea because then I thought I wouldn't have to make work anymore if I was so enlightened. Anyway, it's a feeling I got when I was working on the rocks. Okay, and then I've done a few really large public commissions. And this is in the New York City subway. And it's, you can see there's rocks on the left, rocks all the way through it, and then this very compressed staircase. It's 41 feet long, and this view out into the mountains. It kind of, since we were living in the Hudson Valley, I got some of my information from being up there. But part of the idea of it was that before Manhattan looked like that, you had landscape and you had rocks, and everyone knows Manhattan is built on rock, is why they were able to build those initial tall buildings. And the curve is the hallway, and so if you follow to the front, there's an actual staircase next. So that was to echo that, and then you could go to the street. And if you go the other way, the rocks intersperse with the tiles, so they're like almost excavated, and then you get to escalators which bring you up to a public space on the next floor. And I don't have a picture of it here, but I did a small model, like 7 inches by 41 inches, you know, an inch to the foot, which also I used colored clay. And a lot of public commissions are competitions. So this, that little model I made is what I showed this committee, and also I had to talk about why it was so very interesting, so they would give me the commission. And so there were, and I was picked to be in the running by someone who saw one of my shows, and even though there was nothing in it bigger than like the view from the basement, which was a person, and some of them were like, I would say my work used to be at that point ashtray size to person size. They were interested enough to say I should try to do a proposal for it. And one thing I also did for this, which was a great surprise and good thing that I did a life-size drawing of, 41-foot long drawing, and I installed it on the wall. And for some reason, because of the tilt of the floor, the whole thing looked like a sinking ship. So luckily, I got to see this before I did the sculpture and was able to do this to it. So it would have been just a total disaster. And that's another viewpoint going the other way. And it took something over a year, and it's put together in sections. So I wanted it to look seamless, so I didn't want vertical demarcations. So these rocks fit into each other, and some of these trees just go over what would be a seam. So it was a way to make it like a puzzle where it looked like totally fluid, which was also very important to me.
Wall Street subway station.
Oh yeah, Wall Street, the 2 or 3 IRT 2 and 3 train. It's under 60 wall, I'm pretty sure.
Closed on the weekend.
What?
Is it still closed on the weekend?
Maybe. I don't know. Well, maybe from the public space.
Yeah.
I got to do it. I don't know if you care about New York real estate, but the building was on spec by a big developer, and they were able to get, 6 more floors if they agreed to put art in it. So by the time the Morgan Bank building bought the building, they were stuck with making art. So it was a public-private thing. So it was a combination of the Morgan Bank and the MTA. And the MTA was kind of the commissioning agency, but the money and a voice came from the Morgan Bank. And I don't know how anecdotal to be about this. There's a whole story about what it's made of and why, and how that worked into the finances. But if we get done on time and you're all not dozing, you might want to, also, like, you can interrupt me if you have a question. I should have said that at the beginning. But, it's an interesting story, but I should go on. Okay. This is a cardboard sculpture of a table and chairs, seen from 2 perspectives. It's in see up in the corner up here? That's a kind of messed up version of the sketch for the subway wall up here. But it's been cast, and there's only one cast that exists, and the Morgan Bank owns it. I often have had very ambitious ideas about the additions of my cast sculpture. So except for a few small ones and some of the painted ones where I lost interest, they almost always say 1 out of 5, but almost all of them are just 1. Because I said, I could spend money on 4 of these, or I could do the next one. So sometime historically, people might go, what happened to all this work? It's kind of all disappeared. Okay. And this is a draped cloth where I painted bricks on it, and its initial manifestation was I had it draped over a small-scale house. And then since I had this huge piece of muslin that I painted on, I tried other things. And so I made a drape out of it, which is, I think, a relief space. I was trying to, again, focus everything on this idea of the wall or relief. And that I did when I was working. I did a big, you'll see images in a few minutes, I did a very large other public sculpture at JFK Airport. And as part of my experimentation, I made these smaller sculptures. So, and that one was made out of styrofoam and Durabond, which is wall compound. And then it was cast into something else. But this one is really a sketch as part of my proposal. So when I went to see, because after I did the first one, then I got asked maybe, did I want to be part of another one? And after I did Subway Wall, I said, I'm never ever doing any of those things again. They take your whole life, they're debilitating, and then in the middle of it, you want your work to go somewhere else, but you're stuck. But then when they asked me if I wanted to be part of a competition for JFK Airport, you know, I said, well, if I ever want to do another public work and I want it out in the world, geez, the major airport in New York City. So I did work on it. And I do very much like the idea of the problem solving of site specificity, of having to do something that has to fit in a certain scale and place used for a certain thing. Now, some people would hate doing that, so you don't do it. But I kind of like the idea. And the other thing, since I've been teaching already, I got pretty good at presenting my case. So, you know, I could be in front of these business people and architects and tell them why what I made was so swell, you know, and what it was about, in a sense. Because one thing, the arts consultant, do I say that in the film too?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it now. You'll have to wait till tomorrow. Okay. And this is the actual sculpture. And it's, this piece was when I first made the proposal. I had this idea for near the escalators and these other walls, and it was 2,000 linear feet. Now finally, they decided to do 3 projects, and this one of mine is only 600 linear feet. And I was so lucky to get this done. I never would have gotten 2,000 linear feet done, and I was very lucky they didn't give it to me. I would have been in horrible trouble, because, you know, this took forever. And it's made of modified gypsum, which is a kind of plastic plaster. And some of them are very big. They go from about 9 feet by 5 to about 15 feet. And what it's about, and what I talked to them about, was it was about so the cloth was to nod to or relate to the audience, since most people wear clothes, and I don't think people show up at the airport not wearing clothes. So you have drapery and clothes, and then you have even tribal people sometimes live in tents. So cloth is a really big factor in people's lives, and then there's, you know, the Greek myths about cloth. And so I talked about all that. And then I also said that, and why I painted the walls this sort of purple blue, is because then you could think about them as clouds and sky or land and water, metaphorically. And so that was my thinking. And they go from very calm to very activated. So as you go up the corridor, it feels like they are activated by the wind. So I thought that echoed the idea of being in a plane and moving in wind. So that was my thinking behind it. And it literally almost killed me. It took like, well, the contract took a year to negotiate, but then I worked on it somewhere between 3 and 4 years. It was almost debilitating. It was so hard.
Did it have to do with arrivals as well? Like when I've seen this
Well,
piece,
it is the arrivals,
it is arrivals.
because if you're at the airport waiting to leave, you can't see it. But when you come in, it's Terminal 4, the International Air Terminal. If you come in and have to go through towards customs, there was one project that's not there anymore. That was Diller and Scofidio. the architects who did the Contemporary Art Museum in Boston. And they did these really wonderful lenticular photographs, but they faded. And so they would have been allowed to do them again, but they would have had to pay for it. And they said, we're not doing that. And then the second batch of work was mine, and there's 2 parallel corridors. So, and they're similar on each corridor, depending on which side your plane comes in. And then there was a sculpture frieze over the customs by a woman named Deborah Masters. And the thing is, I had to also guess. So I said, you know, I didn't know, but I knew these were opposite a wall of windows. So I said, which was guessing, that at night you would see a reflection of these in the window, and it would be like you were in the middle of them. And that worked out perfectly. It was like a mirror image. I assumed I was right, but I couldn't see it. And then when you come in, sometimes you can see them through the window of the plane, you know, which was very cool to me.
Do you have to go back and maintain these sculptures?
You know, why that's a very good but irritating question. I shouldn't have to. One of the things I had to give them was, I forget how long it was, 20 pages of upkeep, what they should do. They don't do anything to it. So I went a few times. One time I washed them down, touched up a little paint. The walls need a new paint job. I dusted them. No, I'm not supposed to, but if I want them to look reasonable, I've done it a couple times. And they should be taking much better care of it. But there I am. But, you know, they don't look horrible. They just don't look shiny and new anymore. And this is a view of my studio. I'm guessing at the year, but you'll see these later. You've seen this. After I did the airport sculpture, I did some small pieces, but that had a thickness like the drapes in the airport. And then my next idea was to see how thin I could make these draperies in clay. And I have a better picture of this. And that's one of the airport sculptures in the studio that I had. And then when they were all cast, I threw them away. I didn't kind of throw them away. I cut up a lot of the pieces and kept them, and I actually put them in a show with some other sculptures of mine. Okay, so that's my studio. Okay, so when I started doing these thin, observed draped napkins, this is one of them. So you can see how big it is. It's not that big, but they're very thin. And actually, this one I had to do twice. I got it all sculpted, took months, and I also sand on them and then I picked it up like this and it went. So the next day I started it again because I knew, you know, like getting back on the horse. So, and I was much more careful moving it around. And then it got fired, so it's much stronger. But you drop it, it'll break like a plate, you know. And I got really so caught up in these little subtle folds and changes, and the sculpting was very sensual and very satisfying. So I made and this sort of also gives you a little bit of an overview of sometimes why my work goes from one body of work to another body of work. When I did the subway project, I was in the middle of a number of sculptures in my studio. This is why I didn't want to do another one, even though I did. And I got so caught up in the subway sculpture with how the clay went on, you know, and thinking about people seeing it this close, that became extremely important to me. And when I got done with that, I went into my studio, and I had things I had worked on for months, and I just couldn't bring myself back to that time a year before. So I threw them all away eventually, and made some work, and floundered, and then came out the other end. And this is you know, that was 1990, So this is, 20, 15 years later almost. But I did other things in between. And I've always been drawing, so I didn't show you them because it wasn't the idea of relief. So there were many, many drawings that I've shown and made and stuff. And I named these the colors that they were made of. Except the green isn't there. I think it's called royal green or something like that. But they're very delicate. And they're kind of, a lot of the work, subtly, I think, has an uncanny quality to it. What is this thing made out of? Why is it soft? Is it rigid? And so one of the things I very much like doing is pushing materials around and expectations of what it is you're looking at. You'll see more of that in a little bit as well. So the thin one started like the one on the left bottom with no color. And then the one on the right is one work even though there's 3 parts. So this is meant to be the, what would I call it? I don't know, the control piece. Okay, that's what I'll call it. This is actually this area. And this is somewhere in there, a very slight curve. So I also kept thinking about, how in science books or biology books, you get these circles, sometimes within something, or geology books, and you get a close-up? That for me is a little bit what I was dealing with. So then I started to work with plywood, with a similar kind of thing, the idea of draping and folding, and how the hell does this look the way it looks? And it's not like, it's hard to explain it, because it's not like I'm trying to go, whoa, this is wood. Exactly. But I am toying with the idea of, this is wood. So more low-key, but still a kind of slippage of expectation and a perception of what it is you're looking at and how it got there. And sometimes people would say, how'd you bend that wood that way? Which I always got a kick out of. But that's not how they were made. And the one on the right goes from the wall to the floor. And the one on the left was the first one of these wooden ones.
What are the seams like, and what are the edges? Can you see the?
Okay, so, I love having this. So the edges here are sharp. The edges here are very slightly softened so that you can feel the folding. And in person you can see it, but it's subtle. That these edges, and like an edge like this would be sanded just so it was soft, whereas edges like this would be left with a hard edge. That was your question, right?
Yeah.
Mary, am I right that these all started with the same size plywood?
Yes. So that's a good thing to bring up. So the first X amount I made of them, part of my goal was to take a 4x8 piece of plywood and fold it and change it, but still keeping that 4x8 format. At some point, I often have rules with my work, and then before I know it, I've kind of broken the rules. Since I'm the boss, I can break them. But I like holding on to the rules as long as possible, because they're like limitations you have to push around.
It's like a commission. It's
like
a
the commissions, which are limitations, which you then get to see what you can do within. Which I do like those kind of challenges. We have one of my studios is this 18th century Dutch barn, and so when I would make these downstairs, and then I'd install them upstairs, and they look really good here. You know, they look fine in white spaces and, you know, in the white cube. But there's something about them here that is pretty cool. You know, there's some in a person's house, and I've shown them in white spaces, but they feel so at home here. This is a little hard to understand. This is the other side of this. So this fold here is that fold there. And one of the things, this is a chicken and egg thing. So I filled up all the walls and all the spaces, and I'm in this building that has these beams. And so I started draping them over the beams. Now, of course, I can't figure out if I decided when the idea occurred. Oh my God, I have to put them somewhere. I'll drape them over the beams. Or I said, I think I'll drape them, and I have these beams. So it's kind of opportunistic, but I can't tell you how some of this stuff happens.
And there was a Catherine Murphy painting in the corner. The window, look at the window, it looks like.
Oh, yes.
If you're displaying those ones that are draped.
Could you say that
If
louder?
you're displaying the ones that are draped, then,
Do you know what you
If you're displaying them.
if you're displaying them not in the barn.
Yeah, on walls in a gallery.
Okay.
One idea I have, but no one has let me do it, would be to get a white space, rebuild the beams in white, and change the architecture, and then install them. But no one has kind of invited me to do it. But
I was wondering. Yeah.
I would love to do that, you know, to kind of have that situation be built and not a given.
Yeah.
And this is one that lies on the floor. I did a few floor pieces. Now, I did some where they were two-sided, where I built the steel, and then they were draped over, and they made some space. So you could go around the back of these, or see them from the other side. And
Can
so,
I put my hand in there? I mean, is
up
the,
to a point.
uh-huh.
Yes, but inside I reinforced it with a wedge, so it wouldn't break off. Because this is only 1/4-inch plywood, so all these folds only had that edge. So by the time I needed to make these deeper, I had to give a little bit of support. And then, for instance, I could hang these like this. My barn does this, so that was convenient. Or I could take the steel and have it stick up and then hang it like that. But again, did I make these because I ran out of beams and wall space and floor space? Maybe, but you know, then it's maybe like a commission I gave myself. But these ideas, they come sort of together, so it's hard to figure it out. Oh, there's the one on the left that you saw in white that goes onto the floor.
Have they worked over time?
A little bit, but not so much. I have some I didn't put in that are actually more like curtains, and they worked wonderfully, just like, not very much. I think they must protect themselves. The folds must be enough support to keep them from warping much. They darkened a lot, because I had this idea, a purist idea, that I wouldn't protect, which was maybe stupid, or shellac them or seal them so they get a lot darker, just because plywood would do that. And these are 4 very small ones I made. You can see how small they are. But this is 1/8-inch plywood. So I went to a mill, because you can't get 1/8-inch plywood. And I didn't want them to be other kinds of products you can get that thin. So they have this huge sander, and they could put it through and sand it. They have to go through like around 10 times until I got to what I wanted, which was 1/8 of an inch. Because too thick, they would have looked too clunky. So they needed to be thin. So Kathy, for those of you who were here for Catherine's talk, she referred to these draped drawings I made, and these are them. So what they are, and this is a detail of that one. So how big are they? Well, that's the hanging size. So they're about this big, and they're made of silk, and I drew them with acrylic paint and a very fine brush, and then when I'm done, they get tacked on the wall. Sort of like an advertisement for towels, you know. But, and you could see, like I allowed myself, I think of these as kind of hernias, where it's, oh, that's not very pleasant, but nonetheless, where they open up. And when they're not hanging, I keep them rolled up flat so they don't get that form embedded too much. And why I showed you this right here is because of these. So the ideas sometimes reassert themselves in different ways, in different forms. Okay, now this may be my, I don't know, I did these mark drawings, which are not here, which maybe had 4 billion marks on them. So you could look at that and say, oh, whoever made that is insane. These may be as well. So these are 4x8 pieces of linen that I drew plywood on. And you maybe can see, maybe not, that these are made of, you know, with a zero brush. So because if you look close at plywood, the grain is these little thin lines. And I did them perceptually. I had in my studio one of these hanging up, stretched, and then the piece of plywood I was looking at, and then I would go back and forth and draw them. So there's 2 of these, and you know, so they're plywood, but then they're linen. Excuse me. So again, we're back to a little bit undermining what the thing originally was.
And what's the sequence? Were you doing this
I
after?
did this,
In relation to the folded plywood?
in with them. After I did a bunch of them, but in with them. So this is getting near the end of the folded plywood. And this is a little bit earlier, but this is a linen napkin I stole from school, but that's why it has some food stains. And I had it pulled flat, and I had a piece of plywood, and I drew it perceptually, and I didn't know I was gonna, oh yeah, okay, now I know. It was gonna be rough, and then I was gonna sculpt this, looking at that, but then at a certain point, this became a real drawing, so I figured I would make it into a real drawing. Then I sculpted this, looking at that, and then I incised, before the clay was fired, the same grain from the same piece of plywood as that. Then I fired it and did these washes of color on it, and now this is one piece of work. And I just thought of the title of it 2 days ago, because it just didn't have a title. Okay, so around 2019, this is going to be a bunch of very fast film clips. I started making these animated films based on photographs I took on a trip we made to China in 1987. But they perked for like 35 years. I would look at them, I would go into Photoshop and cut them apart, and I recorded sound, but I didn't quite know what would happen with them. And then in 2019, I made some decisions, and I started making these animations. So I'm up to number 14 now, which isn't here at all. Oh yes, there's a quick clip from that as well. And so, again, it's a little bit like, I picked clips that were actually relief kind of situations. So they come out of, even though they come out of photographs, they come out of the sleight of hand of taking something flat and making it spatial. And also in this case, making it move. And so the first ones were maybe a couple of minutes, then the last few were like 9 or 10 minutes, and now the one I'm working on now, which I've been working on for over a year, is going to be about a half hour. And for that one, I even built a stage set. So I have these very short clips, so you could also see the relationships. China1987.com, where there's about 12 of these on there. This one? Oh, the clip itself? No, you mean the actual
trip.
video.
No, the trip, the
Oh,
voyage.
the trip, not the clip, sorry. The actual trip was close to a month. But I'm on the 14th one. I'm doing it chronological. And even though it's not a documentary, even though I was included in a film festival in Queens, New York, under documentary, but that's fine. The other ones were pretty liberal as far as the idea of documentary. And on, I think, the 14th video, maybe the 4th or 5th day of the trip. So I have a little ways to go. You see, it's like you take a flat photograph and you do this. It's like insanely magical, if I say so myself. And then, I hadn't shown you that one yet. So that's Jersey City, Hoboken, and Manhattan, which is so much like the space I'm making in those films. And as far as going out of time and space, this really gives you an idea of how much you do that when you walk around this sculpture. So this is close to the actual viewpoint, but probably a little bit to the left. And this is a side, and that's a bigger side. And that's fairly big, you know, not huge. And this is cast bronze, I think.
It's 3 views of one piece.
3 views of one piece.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. These are from different of the films, just so you can kind of get an idea of the space. See, very short. That just kills me. Those flat figures having 3-dimensional images. And all those buildings actually were compressed in perspectival space. Maybe I'll show that one once more. That's Kathy down there waving at you. And this is the one I'm working on now. This is number 14, so there's a few clips from that. It's kind of a funny scene. Oh, wait, we're supposed to go yet. It's not done. Wait, go back. Oh no, wait, no. Oh no, nope. You're not listening to me. Oh, shit.
Sorry, Harry, we're seeing it.
You're not seeing it. Okay, let me see if this one can go through. These are, okay, that's good. Oh, there's just 2 more clips. That's my friend Michael. That's me. This is in the cemetery. Here. And then clippity cloppity, clippity cloppity. Okay, and this is on the stage set I built. And this makes really great plume when it falls. And this, I think, is the last one. And these are all cut out from the photographs from that are part of this whole video. Okay, that's it. Yep. Any questions?
No.
Yes.
Have you read the short story or book Flatland?
I hate to say it. I know of it. I don't think I read it.
I haven't read it in a really long time.
Yeah.
But I just think maybe you'd like
Oh,
it.
yeah, but that makes sense.
It's the premise is like it's kind of silly, but I think it's like a lion is writing to his fellow lions because he's seen
Was
the
there a video
two-dimensional
made
space.
related to it?
It's
Or
like
is it a book?
I think it was a book, but maybe it got turned into.
Is it?
I made an animation of it.
What are you going to
It was
say?
like a weird conceptual animation was made later, but it was originally a book.
Uh-huh.
It's a
It's like
sequel, actually.
Okay, I know of it.
It's like a two-dimensional character is writing
Well,
to his
I'll
fellow
have to look for
two-dimensional
it.
characters, and
Refresh my memory if I.
no one believes him that three-dimensional
Uh-huh.
exists.
I like that
You might
reference.
like it.
It's cool. Anybody else? Yes.
Have you ever considered going into digital dimensions with your work?
Going into what?
Digital dimensions? Like
Well, I think I am in the animations.
Oh yeah. You know what? Let me think about that.
Okay. Yes, I have thought about it.
I'm glad.
You can ask him?
Yeah, I'm struck by the breadth of the materials present in your body of work,
Yeah.
and the like beautiful way the presentation is like there's like a thread, like one thing kind of like leads to one another. But can you just talk about maybe like how you arrive at the material or
Well,
where it takes you?
I'll respond to what you said in a few ways. One is, sometimes I do embrace the breadth of what I do because I'm stuck with who I am. But sometimes I'm horrified by it. And I'm always, one thing that pleased me about putting together this talk is I could hook together these various stages my work went through thematically, spatially. So I can go, oh, good, there's a good connection between everything. So, and I also, I think it was Daniel who asked me, or Marta, I forget, do I leave things behind because don't think they're good anymore, I'm tired of them. And actually, I never want to leave anything behind. So when I see things like those milk cartons, I go, oh God, I could have explored that area for my whole working life without getting bored and without any trouble. But within that is this pathological need I have to go with where my ideas pull me. So it's a mixed thing. And I don't think I've made it easy for the dealers who've worked with me. Because dealers don't like that. They want to know they have something. And then I do something else and they go, what are we? And so it's pragmatically been probably a bad decision. But emotionally, artistically, may be a very good decision, because I'm not unhappy with where the work has brought me and where it continues to bring me. You know, and I'm a proponent of doing the work that excites you and interests you and that you want to do, and I've certainly done that. So it's very complicated, and sometimes I'm thrilled and sometimes I'm furious at myself, but I'm sort of stuck with who I am and what brings my brain and my emotions, I would say pleasure, but it's bigger than that. Fulfillment, satisfaction. And I'm not sure if I'd have that on the same level if I made myself, this is a good place, just, God damn it, stay there, you know. So that's who I seem to be. And I'm old enough that I seem to have been that person for most of my life, you know, and now I'm making these films, and things recur. Like, I don't feel like I ever let anything go permanently. So the little folded drawing with the weave, I did like a zillion of these weave and mark drawings, which have evolved into these other kind of line drawings, which I'm still doing. And I started one a few months ago. It's about this big, and it's going to take me probably a couple of years because the lines are this little. And you know, I've had shows of sculpture and shows of actually even photography, and shows, and my films have been in film festivals, and numbers of shows of drawings. So it's not like I've had no success, so I can't feel as bad for myself as I want to. So, you know, that's my answer. It's a complicated answer. And I taught, which did two things for me, like Catherine. I learned so much from teaching. And I think it was teaching that enabled me to get those public projects, because I could stand in front of these people and stuff. And it also doubly freed me from doing what I wanted to do. And I loved it for most of the years I did it, until I was tired of doing it, and then I left, you know. It wasn't a clean answer, I know, but it's, yeah.
I have a question related to that, which
Yeah.
is like, how do you have your studio set up? Do you bounce around from different?
Oh, well, my studio.
Do you do like, okay, today I'm gonna do like 2 hours
Okay, my
of the
studio
little
is kind of-
lines, 2 hours of the plywood? Like...
No, it's different than that. So, like, my studio now looks a little like that shelf that Kathy painted. It's gotten explosively out of hand. So in my main studio, not the one with the plywood, because that's not heated, I have in the front a big work table with the stage set, which takes up like a big whole work table. Now, I must say, I'm pretty much done filming that, but I can't quite bring myself to close up shop yet. In the back of that studio is a drawing table and a little table with paints and brushes and the drawing. And then for the film and animation, I have the house. So I would say I have an office, which I do, but right now there's no room for me in it, because the whole thing looks a little like that shelf. So on the animations and the editing of films, sometimes I'm in the kitchen, sometimes I'm in the dining room. Every once in a while I clean off my desk in the studio, and for a couple of weeks it's lovely, and then all of a sudden it's like it's piled this high. So that's kind of how it's up. And then the unheated studio, I haven't done work in there for a little while, the plywood. You know, it's still installed upstairs, but I have to keep the lights on in there 24/7. Luckily they're newfangled lights, because otherwise all these hundreds of bats move in. And the lights seem to have slowed them down quite a bit.
That's a good tip.
But there are a couple of stalwart bats that I keep thinking must have eye shields for when they go to sleep. But it's not like it was, but I have to keep the sculptures covered and be a little bit careful. And I get squirrels sometimes, but it's such a beautiful building. In order to seal it and insulate it, I would ruin the building, which I can't bring myself to do. And even my studio, which you saw the picture of, when I had that built, I could have put a second floor on and had more wall space and more floor space, but I couldn't let go of that. So I have walkways instead. So I kind of think of it as a combination of Aspen, Colorado, and Piranesi. But I love it, but it's not as practical as it might have been as a workspace. Yes?
Can you talk about the general process of the bronze aluminum casting?
Sure. So all of the sculptures were made of something else first, either Sculpey, which is, you ever hear of that? It's goofy stuff, or plastilina, and then I do it, and then we make rubber molds, and then we cast it, either lost wax or sometimes plaster, like the painted still life I did myself. I made a mold and then I painted the plaster. And I was doing a lot of that at one point, but it's also very costly. You know, the tall one with, what was that called? Room with a view from the studio? Something like that. Where I had the pot and then the view out the window. I don't even know how much that would cost to cast now. But I also, I don't know, is this too private or weird? I was very lucky that periodically I got dealers to put up the money. And how I got that to happen, I don't know, but there would always be a limit to how much money they were willing to give me. So that slowed that up a little bit. But then I got the commissions and that changed what I wanted to do anyway. I don't know if that answers your question. And also, if I make it out of something like plastilina, I can keep it for years. You know, it doesn't really dry up that much. It's an oil-based clay. Or even Sculpey, I do it, it hardens and I can paint it.
But most of them you took to a foundry, right? You didn't do yourself.
Oh,
That was the cost.
Oh, yeah, I didn't cast them myself. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a little detail. Yes, that's why that cost so much money, because I wasn't paying myself pay yourself a lot of money to do this. No, I went to foundries, and various different foundries, and even the subway wall, which is made of bronze, clearly had to be done in a foundry. And then airport sculpture curtain wall was done in a casting place in Pittsburgh. But those were covered by the commission, and they were $1 zillion, but that was covered by the commissioning agent. And the subway wall one, which I had proposed in painted aluminum, because these things have a budget, and I could bring it in exactly on budget if I did it out of painted aluminum, and I wouldn't have even had $1 for myself. So then I thought, wouldn't it be better if it was in bronze, which doubled the budget? So then I had to go to the Morgan Bank, who was footing the bill, and talk them into doubling the budget, which I did, and they did.
And what was your argument?
Here's what was
Because
so
I'm
hard.
thinking this bronze stuff is expensive and heavy, and stick with Sculpey.
Here's what was so hard about this argument. I couldn't tell them the aluminum was no good. I fooled you, the aluminum's no good, let's make it in bronze. But I did tell them that its longevity would be better in bronze, because if the aluminum got scratched or worn off, it would be shiny. Whereas if the bronze would look beautiful if it had no patina on it, if it had no color, and it would be less vulnerable. Even though the aluminum was great, it would have been wonderful, the bronze was a better investment. So, and then, which was amazing, I don't know exactly why, they decided I shouldn't do it for nothing. Because even the bronze would have left me nothing. And they gave me some more money for myself. And then when the foundry was giving me trouble because they kind of messed something up, and it was first cast, it was made of plastiline, the whole 41 feet, and they made these waste mold casts out of plaster, and the surface got a bit wrecked. And I kept telling them that it needs a huge amount of work now, and they kept saying it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. So the Morgan Bank sent down like 4 lawyers to talk to them for me, and we made a compromise, and they paid me to have more assistants to bring the surface back. So sometimes that stuff's very fraught, you know. And the airport sculpture, it just took so much time and so much effort, and traveling back and forth to Pittsburgh. The little things were much easier. You know.
When a dealer paid for a little sculpture to get cast in bronze, did the dealer then own it?
Not exactly. So I had a few dealers. Sometimes I go, you could have been a con man. I had a few dealers who just laid out for casting. So one dealer who, I had a great dealer, then I left for another dealer who wasn't as great, then I went back to the other. So the dealer who wasn't as great just kept paying for stuff, but I was smart, and we had a written agreement. And the agreement was I could pay her money or I could give her work. So when I was ready to leave, I said, I don't have that much money, I'm gonna give you work. And she didn't want that, but we signed this agreement. And so I gave her all the small works. She sold every single one within a couple of years, so she did fine. And I kept like the bigger ones because they would have cost so much money to cast. My other dealer, who I still work with, one of those people, were really sweet and laid out some money for me, and said, you know, when they sell something, I get a share, they get a share, and I should pay them out of my share. So I did sometimes, and other times I said, you know, I kind of need the money. And then at the end, you know, when they sort of had enough of giving me money, which was reasonable, they bought an edition of these photographs I had of Joseph Cornell and his house and stuff, and we evened it out. So I don't know if the monetary thing is, I know you weren't talking about that.
That was interesting.
But it was very interesting how to maneuver in the world. Making sculpture is very complicated, as you know. I would always tell my sculpture students, you have to remember that you're making sculpture, but a big part of it is moving things around and storing things. And you really have to get used to that. And it's often more expensive to make. So you do the best you can, you know, and be clever and look for space and look for how to store things. The films, by comparison, are just like that. There's nothing there. They're just there. They are in here, and you don't have.
You
to
can
carry.
ship them.
Right. You can ship them by going send. You know, so that's turned out to be nice, and especially as I've gotten older, it gets harder to carry big, heavy things around. You know,
These new innovations that you've made, what is the final format? Are they going to be like pieced together into one long film?
I thought they were going to be until I got to. Let me shut this off. Until I got to too many. So they're kind of more separate things now, but I will group them together and show one after the other.
Yeah.
But it's like mix and match. I can do 5 of these short ones, or you know, now this new one's over a half hour long, so that's the thing. And when I started, I thought of it as one thing.
Yeah.
But now, when I don't know who's going to sit through that, and the answer is, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
The real answer is, I don't know. But right now, they're separate things.
Because it's sort of, you know, thinking about your archive projects too, or like your series, like your self-portraits,
Right.
or your visitors. I mean, it's so interesting to me that they live online.
Right.
Like you can see the archive online. But I guess for those two projects, what would be the ultimate form of the format of it?
When I made the first number of them, we use big files, but I just, sometimes I make decisions with no real information. So I said, well, they're gonna live online because they can't be big. And then I got into some film festivals and saw them big. I love them big. And not only that, they hold up. The files are big enough that they hold up. So they'll have more than one life, I guess. And also sometimes there's very subtle things going on. And you really don't miss anything when they're, as big as this or bigger, much bigger. So that's the answer.
IMAX theater next.
IMAX theater, yeah. So they live on various planes in various places. And I don't apply to too many online festivals because I think half of them are scams anyway. And there's a few good ones, but I love when they're on a festival where they show them in the theater. That really pleases me. People go see them and ask questions like this, or, it's not the mall. It's not the movie at the mall.
And it's not a gallery opening either.
And it's not a gallery, which somewhat frees me from that. Even though I keep making drawings, and there's a nice book of my drawings, and but I'm always playing catch up. I'm always behind on everything. But not these films. I finished those. And you can ask me something else.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I loved when you were describing rock into clouds and how you had to stop before you might find enlightenment. And so I was wondering, like, what you would say your ultimate search or goal is when you're making these relief spaces, like what you're trying to find.
I guess to live in them, in my head. So I don't know if that's a search or just in real time the experience of looking and making them. Because it's a world I love. And again, it's not unlike making the animations with the photographs. It's like, there's a photograph and it implies so much more in space and time than you actually see. But I can make that happen. So, and with the relief spaces, I could, push the world around in a certain way to live in my head in these various kinds of permutations of flatness and dimension. So, I don't know if that's a goal or just a process kind of thing. Do you want to add to that?
Me?
Yes.
No,
Sometimes Kathy knows what.
Well, what's really interesting is doing the public commissions and dealing with the casting and the actual physical nature of that. As a painter and looking from the outside, it was like hell. I mean, you have to deal with the people like all the time. You're dealing with people, you're depending on people to cast your work and not fuck it up, and you're depending on people to understand something which they are not capable of understanding, and you're working like a dog, and like I've never seen anyone work harder. I mean, at one point they gave us all the money, gave him all the money, and
for the airport, right?
For the airport sculpture, and he was depending on the foundry finishing their work on time for him to get it into the building, because it had to go into the building before it was built. It had to
Or there'd be no way to get it in
or
there.
they could not get it in. But he had all the money, so we were looking into places that didn't have extradition, because we were gonna have to buy.
I was afraid we were going to have to flee the country.
Flee the country, because in fact.
Because it was hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Thousands of dollars.
which I didn't have anymore because I gave to the foundries.
Right, and so I keep on saying, are artists capable of this? I mean, I'm not capable of this. This is not something I would bargain for. This is like something that if you're president or something, you have to deal with this kind of stuff. I mean, you know, like I say, I want to walk around my bathroom, you know, so it's like really, this is real life stuff. So the films, although y'all know how expensive animation is, it is very
Well, if you're paying for
expensive
people to help you.
and as
Yeah.
time draining as any medium in the universe. It's truly, it's just, I'm fast compared to him. So this is really slow. But on the other hand, it's not the world. It's at least he can sit and work at it at the pace that he has to work at it. And you don't have to go to Brazil because they. But it's.
So that was good, that was very helpful.
Okay, but I know you guys are sculptors, and I'm always like, well, my paint
She
is.
wasn't scared of shit.
I know, but my paint is at Yale. I went into sculpture. I went, don't do it. Just don't do it. This is the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life. And I'm very, and you can. It's mostly about space, and you can eat up so much space because you need to. You just need to, unless you're going to make miniatures, whereas you are. It's really hard. But, you know, it's wide open.
And one thing, it's funny because, the few big pieces I've done, you go to a panel, and there are business people, the people putting up the money, maybe an architect, the arts consultant, but no artists. And you're talking to them, and I like to have my proposals fairly far along, so they can't, I would think, in their mind, re-envision them. But nonetheless, someone might say, don't you think it would be interesting if you, and I always say, that's an interesting idea. I'm going to give it some thought. No intention of ever giving it some thought because it was idiotic. But nonetheless, and not to be totally misleading, but I would say, oh, nice idea, thanks, and then I would do what I was going to do. And they had enough to go on that I showed them that they weren't going to be able to say, this is not what you said you were going to make. So I was fairly on firm footing because what I showed them is what I intended to make. But this, and then when I was out in Pittsburgh and I was working with these guys who were casting for me the airport sculpture, a few of them let me know they thought I was a New York artist taking advantage of them somehow. I was coming in, I was doing this big piece, I was going to be famous, I was going to be rich, and so I was somewhat resented. But then, for one thing, they saw how hard I worked. I was there into the night working on these things, and they had to go, well, he's not just saying do this, do that. And then I had to follow. So I went out to dinner with them sometimes. I had to sort of read the newspaper and follow the football game, which I couldn't give a crap about. Oh, the
Steelers.
Thank you. Steelers. It was so weird. But I wanted them to kind of not hate me because we were working together every day. And it's not like, it makes me sound like a fraud, but I didn't feel like, it was like if you're at someone's house, you might be polite and talk to them about something that interests them. I thought of it more like that. And I didn't have anything to gain monetarily except a nicer atmosphere of us all getting along. And then one of my friends, who was a former student, who was a Marine, came down to help me, and he worked with me a lot. And the guy who ran the foundry was a former Marine, and my friend was an officer, and this guy was an enlisted man. I got treated with such respect after that. It's like, and you could see we were very close. So it's funny, you get points for the weirdest things, and you're happy too, because you're away from home, you're in this dungeon of an old steel mill, trying to work and then going back and forth, from Pittsburgh to the Hudson Valley. So it's like, but it's true, the films do physically free you from that stuff. Even though I'm working on a drawing. Catherine, I was getting these eye pains from my drawing. And Kathy said, why don't you work on a bigger piece of paper? So I did this drawing this big. And when I went to use a bigger brush, it wasn't working. So now I had a drawing this big that I was still working with, and that's what I'm working on now, a drawing this big with like a 0 brush. So in a sense, I undermine my own well-being, but it'll be a nice drawing when it's done. It's just maybe I'm willful, but really I have my standards and what I want things to look like, and I try not to compromise very much. Yes?
You taught for many years.
Yes.
Big question, but what advice do you have for art students?
I said that to someone before. But a few pieces of advice is, a few of you heard me say this before. One is you should really love what you're doing. It may be all you get out of it. And anything you get more is a huge present. So if the work itself thrills you and you love seeing what you envisioned, hopefully that's satisfying for your whole life. So I think that's very important. And if you like something else just as much, think about it. No one's making you be an artist. Even though I do find with people who are artists or were artists, they're very apologetic if they stop working and do something else. But there's other people have wonderful lives who do other things, So I think that's my main thing. And the other thing maybe I would say is, if you want to be calculating and be out in the world and say, I think I know what's up and this is how I can make this work and get a career, you could be wrong so easily and then make things you didn't want to make, So it's not great practical advice. Also, the nice thing about being an artist is it gives you skills, and you sculptors, you can do all kinds of stuff and have a job and make your work, and then it's just a question of balance, how much time you need to keep a roof over your head versus how much time you need to do your work so you feel satisfied with it. You guys have, this isn't, I lived in a log cabin and I walked 10 miles to school. But the thing is, it's almost the reverse. It's harder for you guys than it was for us. Because I could have a shit job and make a small amount of money and be depressed and poor, but live. Have a crap apartment, be nervous at the supermarket, but not be out in the street. Everything's more expensive now compared to what it is to even live a minimal life. So you guys are going to have a harder time because of that. Everything is crazy expensive now. Even being poor is expensive. So you have to figure out a way to deal with that. The work, doing the work could give you such satisfaction and such pleasure. And like sometimes when I get a parent, who comes to me and says, well, what's this art stuff? My son was going to be research biology. Now he wants to be a sculptor. What do I do with that? And we talk back and forth. I think he was afraid he was going to have to pay for graduate school and maybe give him money the rest of his life. But finally what I say to people like that is I say, do you want your kid, who's a lovely person, and I mean that when I say that. I haven't had any parents of horrible kids who've asked me that. Do you want him when he's 50, he or she, when they're 50 years old, to think they didn't have the life they wanted and to be miserable? Probably not, so think about that. And that sometimes works. It does. And then this one kid, his father was a lawyer and was really upset. He went to grad school, now he has a tenured job. So it can work out great. And also, again, having some sort of job and you manage the hours, and then having some time to do your work isn't so bad, you know. And teaching is great, but first of all, not everyone can do it. A lot of people can do it, but not everyone can do it. But also, there's not that many jobs, so you can't, for how many artists there are. So you really can't count on that either, you know. But life is not fair, life is hard. Wow, that was great, don't you think?
Thanks, Harry.
Thanks for the pep talk. But I can't think of anything I would have rather done than spend my life making art. I was lucky. I got a teaching job. Kathy did well. So we have a reasonable life, which I don't take for granted, and I'm very thankful for. But it can happen. You know, it doesn't happen for everyone. So, and then worst comes to worst, you do something else. And you work the best, and you work as many hours as you can. And you work at the kitchen table if you have to. You don't need a studio. I mean, when I grew up in the log cabin and walked 50 miles to school, my first 3 years of art school, I lived at home with my parents in a not very luxuriously sized apartment, and I did my work at the dining room table. All my artwork for school. And they put up with it, but it was not, I don't think, that pleasant for them, but they were nice about it, you know, and I traipsed on the bus with my work. So, but that's what I wanted to do. And, you know, you don't need a big fancy studio. So you work smaller. You make models for things, you know, that maybe someday you'll make. Does that sound reasonable? I mean, it's not rosy, but it's...
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You, now with the movie work,
Right.
the animation
now that
work...
I'm a big movie director.
Exactly. You're collaborating, though, which,
Yes.
you know, except for the collaborating with the foundry workers, you didn't do much, or except for our shared project.
No.
What's that like?
Oh, it's great. Only because I have two wonderful people who work for me. One is our regular assistant, who just works for us. And actually, I've worked as artist's assistant when I was younger. I was very lucky. I worked for Joseph Cornell, and I worked for Tony Smith. So I worked for amazing artists, but I didn't get paid a whole lot. But it was such great experience. So that was good. And now we have an assistant. He only works for us, both of us, 2 days a week. And before the films, we didn't always have a lot for him to do, and we could be written about as an expose. But whoever becomes our assistant knows that their job is strangely varied. They might help me take the trash out. They might work in the garden sometimes. As much so we have enough work to give them 2 days work. But now Labe is working he's become so good at sound. He's really, you know, a huge help on my films. And when he needs to, he helps Kathy set up for her paintings. But that's only 2 days a week. And then I have another person who I got through ZipRecruiter, who kicked me off of ZipRecruiter after 2 people answered me. You know what ZipRecruiter is? It's one of those big employment agencies. So I register with ZipRecruiter. I send them my job description. They post it. You get like a week or 2 free. And I got 2 responses. One didn't work out, and one is still working with me. It was a few years ago, a year and a half ago. And they got in touch with me and said, "What's the name of your company?" I said, "Harry Roseman." And they said, "Are you incorporated?" I said, "No." They said, "Out." But I got someone great. And she lives in Yonkers, which is, how far is Yonkers? An hour and a half from us. And we meet in person once in a while, but we meet online once every week or 2. And she's actually too good. She's so good that I have to hold her back, because I want these things to have a kind of homemade feel, but with some elaborateness and some convincing this. Like, you saw the one where the guy pushes over the statue and then falls bunker like that. Well, she sent that to me and said, it's a rough sketch, we'll get to the real thing afterwards. I said, no, this is it, this is great. And so she's very good about trying to go with me on what I want. And if I say something's not working out, she doesn't get mad at me. So that's worked out. So it's worked out beautifully. And as it is, this has been over a year by myself. First of all, I don't think it would have been as good, and I would have been struggling still for months and months more. So it worked. It's wonderful. I love it, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And they may give me a suggestion, and I may take it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I get really good suggestions. You want to try this? I go, oh, that's a nice idea. So I'm fairly open to this idea of collaboration. I did a big wall drawing in a kind of, I don't know, what would you call a recliner? A gallery? A public space?
Oh, the climber.
Yeah.
Public.
Non-profit public space.
Non-profit.
So I did this big drawing in it, and someone made a wonderful film about it, which is somewhere online. I even forget what it's called. And during the film, they were interviewing one of my assistants, and I was saying with them there that, yeah, I give them a lot of leeway, blah, blah. And this young woman but they were very helpful. So, that's the answer.
I think collaboration for you is your nature. I think that you've been collaborating for years in many ways. Sometimes it's been horrible, but I think you are.
And we collaborated.
Yeah.
We made something good.
Yeah, but I think you're a social animal. I think I'd rather die, but it makes you very happy.
I am very much. I like interacting with people a lot. So, for instance, my last film, my first feature film called Holiday Special Thanksgiving 2024, it's experimental, meaning a lot of it's not very entertaining. But an hour of it. What?
That's the definition of experimental.
Yes, exactly. An hour of it is me shopping in the stores, and sometimes you see people, and then a half hour maybe is the dinner. But I do a lot of these ad hoc kind of short films outside of the house, and sometimes I involve other people in it, like the information film, which is now a film I'm doing with just headshots of people telling me information, friends, people in stores. It started with a friend recommending a book, and then another friend recommending a plant, and the last one was the deli guy telling me in detail the best way to make mozzarella cheese. And they have to almost unfold naturally. So I don't go and say, any information for me. It has to be in the course of interaction, which is part of me being out in the world in a certain way. And I'm very comfortable being out in the world, and I like talking to people, and I like being friendly with the people at the market. And, I said to Kat the other day, which is so weird. So I go to this one market where 1, 2, 3, 4, not that one, maybe 5 or 6 of the checkout people I'm friendly with. Chat, hi, how's your cat, what's going on? And if I go at night and there's people I don't know, I get a little sad. I go, what is this place? Why am I here? So I do interact a lot.
Yes, but you walked in and you said, I'm in such a good, you came home and you said, it was so fantastic. 5 of my friends, 5 of the people I talked to were on the registers. And it was like a moment of happiness.
I meant it too.
I know. I was like.
So I don't, and actually in the film, which is seeable, but I don't know how you do it unless I send you a link. Oh, it's a film festival called Wild Sound, and they gave my feature film an award of best something or other feature. but they also do interviews with you and audience response on tape. And I think anyone now can access that film. First, they weren't going to let them, but then I wrote them and said, last time you gave me an award, you allowed. Why aren't you allowing this now? So they said, all right. So that's findable on there. And then on YouTube, there's a bunch of other films. Some are, I think they're all interesting, but some are, I will admit, are very boring. But they move slow and sort of contemplative and stuff like that. But some of them are quick, like there's Buying Cat Food 1, Buying Cat Food 2, Buying Cat Food 3. That's a good trio. And there's Checking Out. But Grocery Shopping, which is a little longer and did get an award for Best Experimental in the same film festival. And the best thing in the audience responses, my favorite responses would be something that other people may not have been happy with. But this one woman, it was, because I wanted this film, even though it was edited, it was at least twice as long, I wanted it to feel almost stream of consciousness. So she says, I didn't say this in the film, did I?
No.
Oh, good. So she says, I don't want you to be as bored tomorrow. So she says, I know there was an idea there, but I can't figure out what it was. There must be an idea here. And then she said, sometimes I don't think he knew the camera was running. But I loved it because it was actually edited and it felt like, which is what I wanted it to feel like. You don't see any people. You only see the shopping cart, my arm, the food, and you hear people talking, and me talking sometimes. But it was very hard shopping with the camera in one hand, like seeing what the figs were like, and then trying to get them into the bag. And a friend of mine said, it's a good thing you bought those figs, because I manhandled them so much. But then it's also a little autobiography, because the same friend said, you eat bologna and olive oil? He was like appalled at what I had bought. So that's, and I like my work following me, meaning I go shopping. It's my work. Either I'm filming something or I'm getting stuff for my information video. So I do like my work permeating everything I do, which gives me real pleasure. You know. Okay, we're probably done, right? Thank you.